put on your best clothes, and do your hair. You guys in the other cities, this is not for TV exposure. It's just for you, and here in Atlanta and you people in the other cities, I want you to pass the word of those that are attending the private viewings that you consider to be part of the steady group. If they're not there the night you show this, is to tell them I said I want them to see it. And same here, be sure and tell people to get the tape. After all the time of me doing this, there's enough of the people who had been around for a long time who are now gone, and there are enough new people showing up, and in the other cities, even people I've never met, that it's sort of time for a combination recapitulation and something else. The groundwork of something else, because I'm going to change what's going on here in some direction. But it's time that some of you need to hear something a little more specifically, and of course, fuck a preface, and we've already over-prefaced it, but that was it. All right, one more. To cut down on me having to talk in the third person, or I was going to first make up a story and talk about this kind of activity theoretically, and start about that there have been schools doing this and that, but let's do it the easy way. And I'm going to tell you, since you people know by now that this is not me actually talking about me, but I'm going to tell you this recapitulation of what I'm leading up to is sort of a brief history of what I have done with this, what we've been through. Of course, some of you have been through it, and you can go ahead and take your nap now because you can go, yeah, I was there, I remember that. or more frightening still is I'll start talking about it and you get all fascinated and suddenly think, well, shit, I was there, and I forgot about it. Which of course is just what I'm talking about in a minute. So, I don't know why I'm apologizing and telling you that I'm not talking about me. Here in Atlanta, a few people out of town tonight, we do have two people that didn't know we weren't. In other words, two fairly new people. So I guess I was saying it for them. I hate to disappoint you, but there's no gossip or secrets. So here it goes. First, I want to point out to you that at a very early stage, every mystic, I'll just go ahead and use that word again, people involved with this, but every mystic at a very early stage understood one thing, no matter where they were, what country, what culture, no matter how it was later described by their successors and publishers and etc. They all understood one thing. They realized the automatic, non-personal nature of existence, including man's mental life. That, and even though I could have shortened that sentence even, but that in essence is what the great secret transcendental mystical out of your head, I'll fly away someday work has been about. That is the beginning. And I could point out even all of the stories, the myths, and or even the public religious stories, the way they're told later. I could give you a new interpretation that you'd never considered. That was the first thing, like the Buddhas. As they look around, and you can take even the stories, and I'll just repeat them the way you've heard them, the kinds of things of a Buddha looking around, having led a sheltered life, the way it goes, if you remember. And the king, in fact, tried to keep him from being exposed to everyday existence, and anyway, he finally gets somebody to take him outside the castle, and he looks around, and he sees death, and he sees horror and destruction, and old age and infirmity, and attorneys, just all kinds of horrible things. He just sees all kinds of horrible things, and then comes up with the idea. But notice, all of that is physical. It could even be looked at as being a representation of the Hindu caste system, if you understand what that represented, which is a very mechanical structuring of humanity, a structuring by measurement of humanity, that now they look back at the story and say that someone like Buddha was sharp and humane enough to realize it was undeserved. Contraire, contraire. Try looking at things even more backwards if possible. The things, when you get past the physical point, because even though it sounds fine, what kind of credit are you going to give a man? Let's assume that for some reason you took Buddha to be, to sound on the surface, to have the makings of a spiritual hero. What kind of credit are you going to have to give to a guy that now he's looked at as, by many people, as the epitome of someone who personally achieved without the trappings of religions and all the ritualistic nonsense, that in some way went directly through his own efforts, even though it took him half a lifetime, but just moved directly into another state of consciousness. It worked directly on it without all the other bullshit. So, on the surface, he does sound. He's a great example. I pull him out many times to give a public example. He's, everything considered, it's an easier story. It's a more fruitful story, a more pregnant story than even Jesus and Abraham and Muhammad and all the others. But what kind of credit are you going to give to a guy, the world's most awakened, enlightened man, that his first big shock, what got him going, was to look around and realize people are sick and dying? I mean, the man, that kind of insight, that kind of brilliance is enough to just bring you to your knees, right? It is silly, if you think about it. But people do not think about it, because that is the structure of this sort of activity in its watered down form. But at any rate, I could point out that what he saw was simply the automatic, if you get past the story as being some literal story, that what it metaphorically represented was a man that very early on, he looked around and he realized life is non-personal. Not physical life. That was me trying to make that dramatic or that theatrical sarcastic joke, because anybody with a pea brain, and when the temperature is less than 90 and they've had a full meal, anybody looks around and knows that physically life is non-personal. They don't like it, primarily on the basis that they look around and realize, well, everybody's going to die. And for a long time you assume besides you. And then the first time you get severely sick, you think, well, maybe I'm not an exception. The point is, everyone knows, whether they like to talk about it, everyone knows that physically life is non-personal, or else you wouldn't die, you wouldn't get sick. And of course the simple do attempt to appease extra systemic gods and forces. Please don't let me be sick, please make me well, please don't let me die. And I notice, well, I assume that you've noticed in the last 6,000 years the scarcity of success in this particular aim. So life is obviously, I mean, it's just ridiculous to say that it took some great insight, assuming you're not simple-minded, that it takes some great insight to see that life is physically non-personal. That's not the thing. Everybody knows that. But what I'm telling you is that all the mystics, that the first thing, at a very early age, they realize everybody knows life is non-personal physically. But then they begin to look at that which takes man, that makes man unique. And no matter whether they were calling it at the time or after the fact, soul, spirit, and etc., it is the higher part of the nervous system, the thing that is conscious, the thing that deals in thought and word, words being the product of it. They look around at that and they see that the world of man, the only thing that, or the thing that's obviously separating him from the world of elephants and lions and etc., is the intellect, because he has much in common. He has more in common with the animals than he does not have in common physically. Anyway, he looks around and he sees, any idiot can look around and see that there is a kind of physical food chain, there is a kind of physical, non-personal web of existence that man is not separated from animals. He has to eat animals. And given the chance, some animals will eat men. The one or two that seem to be lacking in culinary taste. But all mystics at a very early stage, they look out and they realize that men are arguing, believing they're suffering and all this kind of bullshit. Now get past the Buddha story of him looking around and seeing people physically suffering. That's why I made the joke, to try to get you past that. He was not a humanitarian. And that was not some insight that he was the first man to look down and go, oh my God, people are sick. That's ridiculous. He looked down and he saw that people believe they're sick in the same way that people believe they're special. They believe that they are especially afflicted. That was the curse of the caste system, not of man physical being limited to some particular vocation. That again is a simplistic version of it. He saw, all mystics do, but I was giving you Buddha, he turned around and he saw that the very thing that distinguishes man is as automatic and non-personal in his operation as is every other part of man. You can look at stories of Jesus. I'm just taking the stories as they're commonly told. As soon as he seems to reach some age of reason, in the Jewish tradition, there he is at the age of 12 in the temple, having fights with people doing commerce in the temple. Commonly referred to, I believe, as him denouncing the money changers in the temple. rather than worrying about bankers or money changers or pawnbrokers, would be worried about the fact, or look at it on the fact, that he looked upon the center of what would appear to be, again, to a 12-year-old, somebody, a burgeoning mystic, a nascent mystic, not burgeoning. He looks at the place, the very source that should be of enlightenment or encouragement in matters extraordinary, and he looks, and it's not all that extraordinary. He goes in there, and they're selling goats and sheep, and you can hock your guitar in there. They're playing the stock market, selling bingo tickets, or is that another religion? Bingo cards. The announcement was, forget all the physically of him throwing them out of the temple and that sort of thing. Was he, again, the same story. He looked upon the very thing that makes man unique and saw that it is not all that unique, that it is not separated from the impersonal nature of physical existence. And I could do the same with Muhammad and the idol worship, and all of them do it. That is the first thing anyone has to realize, or every mystic. And the thing is, there have been many of you people involved with this that still do not realize it. And I threaten recapitulation if anybody knew what that meant. I always liked that word. Well, anyway, I won't show off. What I was going to do is repeat some of what I've done and tell you about it. For a reason, of course. Have nothing to do with me, but just make it simple. Now, we're not talking about, when I say that all mystics, I was singling out the kinds of people who end up, that this is their life. There's not somebody that just sort of does it and can leave, or it's not somebody who likes to hear about it. When I started this, there was a little background of anything specific in the West. And one thing that all mystics must also do, let me point out, is, in a sense, they have to deal in some form of originality. If you need I'm assuming that you people don't really need any proof, but it might make an interesting thing for you to consider, that if you were trying to divine a real mystic from a fake mystic, from a weekend mystic, from a faux mystic, is that real mystics always deal somewhere outside of redundancy, outside of a recapitulation of what has gone before. Some form of originality. There is no choice to it. And the less than real mystic will always be carrying on some tradition. He'll always be carrying on some line. Those that get real slick, they may try and change a few words here and there. They may try to change a term. But they will always not only not try to hide the fact, but they will proclaim the fact that, yes, I am a part of the line of the great Sufi school such and such. I came through the line, and he'll trace 4 or 5 Zen masters. I came through the Jewish mystical tradition, traced through Rabbi so-and-so and this and that. They will say it, and they will be repeating the words, at least of the past person, whoever they took it from, whoever they said they studied from, or whatever book they got it from. It is simply that kind of thing which in the ordinary world, including the ordinary pseudo-mystical world, you've got to have what appears to be that kind of continuity. That's the only way that weekend people enjoy it. That's the only way that religious people can put up a religion with it not working. It's historical precedence. There's nothing else. They think, well, hell, the church couldn't have lasted 2,000 years if there wasn't something here. I mean, just because it doesn't work for me, that doesn't prove anything. And it's not just a joke. At the ordinary level of life, there is a genetic, unseen mentally, but there is a genetic reality, there's an impact of sequence, of linearity, of longevity itself. It does not do anything for making one more conscious, but that is part of the power of impotent institutions, looked at from a wider view, which I'm saying religions are an impotent institution insofar as becoming more conscious. That's not their job. But they say it is. They do everything but say it directly, and if you question them the right way, they say, well, yes, that's what we're interested in, but then they have to admit, well, no, we can't do it. We're not sure how. You've got to be Jesus himself. You've got to be a level of spiritual development of a Moses or a Muhammad, etc. And so the tradition, that is, they do not try to be original. They would throw the Pope out of office if he tried to get too original. If he came out dressed in boots and Levi's and said, hey, dude, and had on a cap on backwards, and he said, by the way, all this stuff that we've been doing about the candles and stuff, scratch it, I got a whole new program. you do know that he would not turn over the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church would turn him over. That'd be the end of the man. You would hear that due to certain unspecified problems, probably of overwork and stress, the Pope has had to retire early. You cannot do that. You couldn't do it in politics, but back to religion. To do this, a real mystic, you have got to be original. Now, I'm not going to stop and argue around with it. You can't be totally original because if you did, you were speaking another language. You'd be speaking in gibberish, as I pointed out. Or you wouldn't say anything, which is too original. Just in case any of you new people think I do not have the creative edge. I'm not going to explain why. You might want to think about it sometime, because it's for your own use eventually too. Remember, I'm not just talking about me. But to really do this, you must be original. And I'm just not going to tell you why. Think about it. If you can use your mind at all, it must be. And it's not that anything that Buddha did, or Yoga so-and-so who just died 50 years ago, or Swami so-and-so. It's not that what they did was not without some benefit. It's not that they were idiots. But a real mystic, even if he picked up something from it, even if, let's say, he got ignited by it, let us say he did personally find out what he was looking for, understood that, yeah, that's what I'm after, and it was based upon some specific person, either living or dead. He stumbles across some Sufi or Zen writer or somebody, some Hindu scribe, and goes, that's it. And it just seems to say something to you. So that person could have started you off. You don't believe in silk slips? Thought some of you studied psychology. It has to be original. You have to do it for yourself. When I started doing this, there was not much of a precedent in the Western world, in the United States, for me to either go against or work on or not go against. So at that time, I looked around, and we had all kinds of spiritual groups that are still going on, and some were more tied to spiritual, as they thought about religious spirituality, and some less. And as all of you, or I assume, know, the first things I did at all publicly was those books, is I used the figure of Gurdjieff. But I looked around, here was a guy, injected no sense of religion into it, was using terminology after it got translated from Greek to Russian to French and then to American, to English. His common terms, what he was trying to describe, they're simple words, but the terms seem absolutely new and unusual. So I looked around, and that seemed to be the best pool from which to fish. That seemed to be the best corridor that you might find people here in the United States who were interested in it, who were not religious fanatics, who in some way could hear an idea having to do with consciousness devoid of any religious, spiritual trappings, and that verbally seemed to have just the most tenuous connection to anything. Because from all I could ascertain, what was publicly conceived by his followers of Gurdjieff then was that nobody knew where the hell he got it, which made it better. But by the time I came around, he already had a sizable following in some parts of the world, but some in the United States. And they were still saying, oh, what a great question mark. Where did he get this? That was the best spot that I could see to start. It was either that, or you have to start from, as I said, absolutely ground zero from originality, which is damn near impossible. So I played around with some of you who may not know it might also be interested to show you how things work. That first book that I wrote, I call it The Dialogues of Gurdjieff, and on the first page it says a TROPICAL adventure. And I drew up a little piece of a desert island, just one of those little cartoon things with a palm tree. I got all kinds of grief once the book came out. I had several people and that was connected with supposedly Gurdjieff institutes and here and there threatening to sue me. That this didn't actually happen. This guy didn't actually. And I thought, well, did nobody look at the word and it struck them on that first page? It took up one whole, after the title page, I had one blank page that says a TROP, I'll get through it. There are two words in the dictionary, tropical, which everybody knows, having to do with the tropics. Another one is the same spelling as tropical. The word tropic means metaphorical. And if you know, the book was presented, it was supposed to have been a guy that, some young American that Gurdjieff met during his time in Paris that kept secret notes and things they didn't know about. And so what I was trying to do was to attract the kinds of people that might have already been interested in that, and then start, sliding in what I wanted to say to see what would happen. But I had people threatening to sue. I had people threatening to come over from Europe just to see me. But I had to promise them that I would make all the papers available that I had access to from this fictitious guy. So I had people dying to come see me. I mean, read it. They were sending me telegrams. That was before fax days. They were sending me telegrams saying that they're prepared to pack up and leave now. And wanting assurance I hadn't destroyed any of the papers that the guy left. And they were just absolutely, well, I wasn't laughing at them. Because I understood that kind of intrigue, and I thought, but on the other hand, I had that going on, and then I'd get telegrams from attorneys in New York threatening that they're going to sue. And they was already picking the book apart. I had Gurdjieff in one spot sitting around drinking bourbon with somebody. And that just threw somebody, I forget now, it was somebody had to do one of these Gurdjieff groups somewhere, it threw them into a fit. They sent me a letter, and it was almost, in the letter was a finger point at me like, boy, you slipped up finally, because he had never heard of bourbon. And they were trying to tell me that they knew for a fact that their aunt had actually been there in Paris with him and knew what he drank, and they just scoffed. They just said it was absolute proof that I made up the whole thing, because Gurdjieff would not have ever touched American bourbon. Which, if that were true, it almost made me wish I hadn't used him as a figure, but it didn't. The reason I bring all this up is consider how serious people take that which deserves no seriousness. How serious people take, even though I was using it. Even though I took the name and stuck it on the book, the dialogues of Gurdjieff, and the intro set was, papers that nobody had ever seen before, to some American expatriate that stayed there after the war and happened to meet Gurdjieff on the cafe, and all the little adventures he had. And it was just, it had nothing to do with Gurdjieff. Except I did take one or two of the things, so I'm going to get to, that I had him address, I guess the only thing in the book, of what he actually had said, according to them, in the books that was out. And he pointed out, the one thing I'll be remembered for was the effort to remember oneself. That was the only thing I even referred to. Now that is what I'm going to get to. That is an offshoot of what I told you of at an early stage, every mystic that comes along. The first thing they must realize is the mechanical, non-personal nature of human existence, including the human mind. But anyway, what I started to say there for a second, was the only reason I brought up all that whole gossip about the book, was look, I had people ready to sue, threatening me. People ready to come over here on the basis of what? Words. Those threatening to sue was on the basis that I had absconded, twisted, misused words that they were now entitled to, since they were part of the, quote, Gurdjieff establishment, or whatever it was. The official Gurdjieff, I guess establishment's what they think of themselves, the estate, the keepers of the flame. No one has ever written and said, oh, by the way, you taught me a new word. I didn't like the book, or, I thought it cost too much, or I didn't like the cover, but at least you made me go look up in the dictionary, and I didn't know there were two words. They're spelled just alike, aren't they? Tropical and tropical. And one means having to do with the tropic area of the planet. No one means a metaphor. Now it all makes sense. All the mystics. Well, let me go back to me. I'll just keep going back and forth. So I did not take any that anybody ever used, but now let me go back to the other side. All of the mystics eventually come up with, I'm not telling you what they did, I'm just telling you how it comes out in history. Buddha's mindfulness. Muhammad, it slipped out through what's now considered to be the Sufis, but was a version of trying to remember God. And the Hindus had a version of that. The Hindu mystics, not those that apparently were, just involved with ritualistic, so-called spiritual or religious activities, but of remembering something. In certain areas of that part of the world, it was a historic one, that you were attempting to remember your breath. And after that, the one term covers it all, is I'm going to try to get you to reconsider as I recapitulate. It's all the same thing. You could narrow it down to just say, remember. You could do that, but nobody will go with it. As soon as they, or after they once realize, the first thing they must realize, that life, even at the intellectual level, and I know that in some areas of the world they called it spiritual, but just consider it, it's anything other than simply the physical life of man, that it is just as impersonal and just as mechanical, flows just as naturally, man's mind, his mental life, as does any other aspect of his existence. So after that, these mystics, just using them as sort of metaphorical figures, the Jesuses and the Buddhas and Muhammad's and Confucius and Abraham and Moses and Zoroaster and etc. and Lao, they did not start out trying to start a religion or to found a religion. They didn't start out trying to impress anybody. They didn't start out trying to get followers. They didn't start out trying to get an audience. They didn't start out trying to get on cable TV so they could stand here and talk. What they were trying to do was to figure out, what in the hell is this? What's going on? They wanted to awaken. They wanted to be enlightened. They wanted to deal directly with the fact that the intellectual life of man is mechanical and non-personal, and no one realizes it. And when you realize it, at the moment you realize it, the whole game changes. It doesn't change a little bit. It doesn't change theoretically. It doesn't change in an afterlife. Right then, it's a whole new world. You still got two hands. You still weigh the same. You still look the same. But right here, the whole game has changed. At that one moment. You don't have to pray to God. You don't have to fast. You don't have to go study with anybody. But you have to realize yourself that what is taking place up here, above the sky at night, was heard the continuing, spacey sound of gunfire. It's the human intellect firing off. They realize it fires off, and it's got nothing to do with you personally. That was my last news item, if you don't recall, from Wednesday night. It was above the sky of the city. It's this periodic. It's constant, but it's periodic, and there's spaced here and there of gunfire up in the sky. The planetarium of your skull. Who is going to stand down a city, assuming it's a time of warfare, and then your brain is a warfare, and your stomach's a warfare? It's not between good and evil. But who would be standing in a city that's engaged in warfare, and there's gunfire going off? You see it, over here, over there. Who is going to stand there in the city who would pass for just walking around intelligent and take it personally? If you're just taking it personally, we're shooting at you. It's just shooting. It's just flashes of gunfire. You're not sure where it's coming from. It's just there. But at the ordinary level, you take there as being you. You take this flash of gunfire over here, over there, just continually, just here and there over the city, in the sky. Every time it flashes, as far as you're concerned, you just had a thought. You were just conscious. At that level, it's not that you were just conscious, you are continually conscious. Except the mystics, at an early age, they realized this is not personal. And when they realized that, the gunfire stopped. And there they stood. And they realized everything I have just said. They understand that gunfire is going on continually, and it is not personal. It's got nothing to do with me. In the way that they know it is when I stop and look at it, it stops. It is, if I may coin a phrase, super simple. After that, it becomes super difficult. Because then the trick is to do it. But we'll leave that to the mystics themselves for whatever they went through. Either they or somebody after them, it doesn't matter. It ends up that there is a teaching that flows from Judaism, from Islam, from Christianity, everywhere, and all the minor sects, but if you notice, almost all of the would-be so-called mystical activities in the world will claim some religious predecessor. They will claim some tie. They may try and keep themselves at an extreme arm's distance. They may even say we are the only true remaining form of original Christianity or Judaism. We're the only ones, we're the keeper of the flame. We're the ones who actually have the metaphysical secret knowledge. But they will still hold on to that lineage to something. Disregarding what the individuals, did they actually live, those people, the Jesus and Buddha, etc. Let's take it after the fact, that we now have the religions themselves at a very simplistic level, but the heart of all religion has to do with the attempt to realize that one's inner life, spiritual life, as I put it to you more directly, simply the upper, it's just the mental life of man, is non-personal, and it fires itself totally automatically. The religions, now no longer having any interest in it, it being for public consumption, as I've been slipping into you, the basis of all the rituals, the prayers, the meditations, the rosaries, the physical rituals themselves of kneeling down, of making and putting your head on the floor, of crossing yourself, and all the ones that you don't know about of smaller sects and other religions. All of it was an attempt to jar one's attention. But since life is already set up and is in motion, it sounds like Captain Irony, but you should understand that once you start out and say, well, what we've got to do is make ourselves realize that what's going on in here, what we take to be us personally, our personality, us being Fred and Jane and Mary and Bob, that this thing is no more than gunfire like inside a planetarium or over a city that's just going off all the time, and it is non-personal. This is not me, and it's not a theory, because you look up, and sure enough it's not you, because as soon as you look, it stops, and you know everything connected with it beyond that at the time. It's not the state of being awakened or enlightened, but it is another complete state of consciousness. You're no longer a normal human being for that moment, which of course is a great excuse of then you're saying, well, I know that, but God, how come I can't do it but like once a month? Well, who wants to be abnormal? Don't raise your hand yet. They come up with anything to jar one's attention, which is the idea of a hair shirt or put a rock in your shoe, which is the same thing as you got to come to church here. What we got to do is to fight. I'll give you a fictitious beginning of all religions. A Buddha, a Jesus, and Moses is dead, and so they decide that here was a guy that knew something. Anyway, it just kind of flows up sometimes. Life needs it. And they decide, well, let's start trying to pursue, just because he's dead, what he understood is no reason it should be lost. He's talked to us, he wrote a few books, or wrote down some notes here, and we'll take it, and we'll all get together, and we'll still benefit from it. We'll go on as best we can. And they go, okay, let's do it. So they start, now we got to decide what to do. You know, the whole thing, we'll assume that they were close enough, right there, let's say just after Moses died, that they understood the whole point is we have got to continually jar our attention so that we do not take this gunfire to be ourselves, that we do not take these flashes, we do not take the mental life of man to be personal, which we know it's not every time we stop and look at it. Am I right, gang? And they all went, yeah. And they said, okay, so we know that. The trick is we have got to, before he died, which I'm going to get to, that all of them told somebody, told some of the people around. He pointed out what it was, and so here's the point. You got to find some way to try and jar yourself out of the normal flow of consciousness so that you remember it. Because that's what expands into this Buddhahood, into Christ consciousness, into another state of consciousness, because what it turns into is a personal consciousness rather than a non-personal one. And they all went, let's assume that he had a small group of people he talked to, and they went, yeah, and they had that much down. And so he came up with something. He said, here's what you got to do. You've got to remember the name of God, or you've got to remember the word love. You've got to remember the word gunfire. Well, let me go ahead and narrow it down. You've got to remember the name of God with every breath. And he told me, he said, but the point is, maybe he told, maybe he didn't. He said, but you've got to do something unnatural. You do not walk around all the time going, Jehovah, Jehovah. And he said, now just go about your business, because I didn't retire from life, and that does no good. Going and sit in a closet, going and sit in a cave is not going to help. Justice being what it is, those that won't, oh, I want to go and sit in a cave, they'd be the ones that are never going to get it anyway. Because they're the same ones that go to church regularly to keep from having to get it. That's a crude way of putting it, but I'm getting to that too. But so he told him, he said, it's not retiring from life, because the quest for the grail is not going somewhere. It's got nothing to do with travel. It's in here. So you don't have to go, you don't even have to go and leave your job. And if you want to, at first, that's one of the tests. Who would like to go to a cave? And everybody raised their hand. He said, all right, you guys go in a cave and we'll meet you later. And then he got rid of them, because they're not going anywhere if people don't want to do that. The rest of them, he said, what you've got to do, just go about your normal business. Now that you understand that every time you look up, you can stop taking the mental life of man, your personal consciousness, you stop taking it personally, because you realize what the level at which you're conscious now, what passes for you in here. The thing that makes you different from all your neighbors, the thing that gives you a sense of self-consciousness, is actually non-personal. It will not stand even a moment of scrutiny. It just stops. It is like a common fog. It is a night sky over all of humanity. It is not personal to you. It is common. It is collective. It is as natural as the flow of the genetic web within all the people, all humanity. And the few people he had, they looked, and they went, we know, yep. Psh. In just a moment they can do it. They're hooked. I mean, it's not an addiction. They had to be wired up for it anyway, or miswired for it. But as soon as they found somebody like a Moses or Muhammad, he said, do that, and they went, oh. Just once won't normally do it. But they kept hanging around. He kept tricking them and feeding them and playing pool with them and bullshitting around, and every now and then he'd bring it up and they'd try it again, and pretty soon they knew, this is it. And he said, all right, that's not it. But you've got to go through that to get to it. Or put it the other way, if you stay like you are now, you'll never get to it. Because you keep thinking what goes on up here, you take it to be of some consequence. You'll start taking what I've told you and think about it and believe that you're doing something. And the smart ones, the sharp ones went, uh-oh, you're right. I was doing it just then. I know you were. So he said, here's what you got to do. To yourself, don't ever make any kind of external show, is every time you breathe, he may have even told me, remember me. Remember the name Moses. But usually they do it something, I know it sounds now important like God, and I've made up things for you before and you always laugh, which I know you will, but he probably told him something like, every time you breathe, remember gunfire. There's something irrelevant. Remember cantaloupe. And those that understood it, understood it. It didn't matter what the hell they called it. So he said, that's it. With every breath. So there was something to jog, because you cannot do it under any ordinary circumstance. It is a struggle. It is a running battle. It is a quest of quests. It is the only mental activity that requires effort. There is no other. People talk about it. I know that you'll find a man bent over trying to balance his books. He's going to have an audit tomorrow. Or a man trying to figure out an invention, trying to make something work. Them trying to figure out what's wrong with a space shuttle. And you see them all sitting there concentrating. They, everybody's, you got an aspirin, and everybody, I know they say they're under tension, their head's hurting. That is not effort. Being aware that consciousness is non-personal, that is the only mental effort, the only mental activity that requires effort. The rest of it just is. Some people are sit there and will be accountants and will put up with the stress, and some can't. But it requires no effort. Only this requires effort. Only remembering cantaloupe with every breath requires effort. Figuring out how to get the O-rings out of faulty O-rings out of a space shuttle once it's in the air and nobody there to do it, that's child's play. Anybody can do that. Anybody can work on it. But very few people can do that. Can remember cantaloupe in the midst of everything else. While still doing their books, while still doing their job, while still having their kids pissing on their foot, or their wife still saying, oh, by the way, I'm leaving you. By the way, the IRS called you again today, in the middle of all of that. And plus he's pissing blood this morning. On top of all of that, he can stand there pissing blood, hear his wife leaving the house, and he can still stand there and go, cantaloupe. And is delighted, because that's all he wanted. I mean, sure, he wishes the IRS wouldn't show up, and he wishes, his wife wasn't going to leave because she's going to take everything he's got and all that. But as long as he remembered cantaloupe while he's standing there pissing blood, trust me, I'm telling you, to a mystic, all is well. That's all it takes. Because, hell, you're going to die anyway. As all of you have pointed out. So here it is. We have a Moses or someone. He told this group of people. He said, here's what do. Just from now on, because you had to have something to tie it to. He can make them see the fact that if you look up at it, if you try and observe your own personal consciousness, it is not personal. It talks about I, it rehashes your past. That's all it is. That's all it talks about, which I keep pointing out to you. It's not a matter of humility or vanity, but ordinary people, which is people running by ordinary consciousness, the common consciousness. What can they talk about? Oh, they can talk about themselves. Oh, they can try and get fancy and talk about where they studied and make it almost sound like they're talking about something outside themselves, but it's always centered around them. And if you doubt this, how about this? Try standing up and talk. Week after week, year after year. Just stand up once and talk for an hour and not talk about you. So you're so used to seeing me do it. Try and do it. I don't mean to impress me or to get up in front of a crowd. Just try out in life. Hang around somewhere for an hour around people you know, or even strangers at a bar, at a restaurant, and talk to somebody for an hour. You do the talking. And talk, but don't talk about you. I never talk about me. I'm not using me for the example, but I'm showing you what's involved. At the ordinary level, what can people talk about? Them. That's all they got. Literally. They can't talk about what they understand because they don't understand anything. Oh, they can tell you, the subject come up about the deficit, and somebody go, oh, by the way, I just read what so-and-so said in this week's issue of Time. And I mean, they'll do this. This is ordinary people. And they go, I read so-and-so's new book. And other people go, really? You mean that Big Mother? I read the whole thing. And it sounds as though it almost is impressive, like I read it. That if you don't analyze, if you don't listen to people, and realize that almost all that takes place of human conversation is senseless. But it almost passes a man and says, well, speaking of the deficit, I was just reading Professor so-and-so's latest book. And it sounds as though you're taking credit for something and you're talking about you. You may try to come up with some quote. Well, he says at the rate we're going, forget what the White House says about the deficit will overtake the economy will have a severe negative impact within the next 2 years. Professor so-and-so says cut that in half. And some of the other ordinary people staying around the bar with you might go, really? And look impressed. And the other person kind of takes credit. He goes, yes. Well, you follow this. It's not attacking ordinary people, but the ordinary mind, ordinary consciousness consists of nothing. That's why I'm telling you, there is no personal inner terrain to consciousness. Searching for a human soul, searching for a human, I like them looking for man's unconscious. Why don't they look for man's conscious? Well, of course we know why. Because they look, it's not there. And they have to go, well, wait a minute. No. That's the thing about having gods and devils, is you don't have to look man point blank in the face. You go, well, this is just minor byplay. We're just a battlefield of which the great forces of good and evil, right and wrong, stupidity and super stupidity fight it out. We're just a humble battlefield. Yeah, right. So you always look for the unconscious, the subconscious. And that way you don't have to look for the conscious and realize, uh-oh, we're on the wrong track to start with. So he tells them, you understand that you can look up there and see that consciousness is not personal. And they go, yes, we got that. But it takes a while for as I said, for people in a sense to get addicted to it, for people to realize this is it. So then the problem is, how can I keep myself spurred on to do this? So he says, here's what we need is something to remind us. And it would have started off, the best form is just simply mental. To get down to the point of wearing hair shirts and ashes on your head and all that, it sounds nice. Like put a rock in your shoe to remind you every step you take, I am a sinner. Or if you want the good way, that I am not fully conscious. But you know what will happen. You'll get used to that faster than you will something else up here. You just begin to limp. You begin to compensate. Ordinary people love that though. And that's a little rough on the foot, and so it ends up with worry beads, rosaries, and other shit. Same thing. It was originally. It's an offshoot of it. But anyway, he tells them, with every breath, just with every breath to yourself, no matter what you're doing. You'll be talking to a butcher, a baker, the IRS, you're talking to your wife. Whatever you're doing, go ahead with that. But as you're doing it, you know you can do it, because you can do it right this second. Even while you're talking, every time you breathe, there's a part of your brain. You got that much consciousness, just ordinary level, which that should, to would-be mystics, that alone should make a man go, ah. With ordinary people, if they had much intelligence, it should make them go, ah, that you can do two things at once. Most people find it a hardship to do one thing at once, they think. But at any rate, you can be talking right now. You could be doing the talking instead of me. Or you can sit there daydreaming whatever you're daydreaming. And at the same time, I know it interferes, but at the same time, you can, while you're breathing, go cantaloupe. You can keep talking, but to myself, I can do this, and you can, and say cantaloupe. You can do it for as long as how? How long can you do it? How long can you do it? As long as you can fucking remember to do it. Yeah, that's right. I just quit doing it. Really? All right. He dies. They decide, well, at least he left us enough information, so we'll press on. I mean, he told us he was going to die. We're not going to sit around here and wait for him to get back up. But we know, we stuck around enough, we see ourselves that this is non-personal, and we see that stopping ourselves from taking it as being personal creates a whole new inner state. And he said, of course, those that go very far, it's not them taking his word for it, but he said, you've got to go through this to ever reach this other condition. People know that. People rightly born to this, people rightly wired up for this, once they get a good dose of just stopping this up here, realizing it, that's what I mean by addicted. Even if you say, well, hey, there is no state of enlightenment, there is no great other thing than that, it's just this gets better and better, and you can do it longer and longer. That's all it takes for a good mystic. He goes, well, shit, that's all I ask. How can I do it more? I'll take that. So they figure, we got enough info, he's dead, so we're going to stick together, we got enough info to go on. They went right. So it's all right. All right, what do we do? So here it goes. Here is the flow of life that goes, all right, how about this? How about a Saturday night? Would that be good? And they'll remember, so all right, Saturday. Yeah, say there's 12 or 15 of them. They go, all right, we'll start meeting every Saturday. How about, Fred, how about over at your barn? Or Euthustus, or whatever their names were. And so he went, okay. So they say, okay. All right, we'll meet over at Fred's barn every Saturday. What would be good? 8? Is 8 good? And one guy said, well, I can't be there at 8:30, so it's 8:30. All right, and everybody, so we can be there and not have to leave. If you're going to be hungry, you don't get to eat during the day, everybody just bring your own sandwich or something. So we don't have to fool around with that and send out. You understand what I'm getting at? I can keep building up. It turns into the same kind of mechanical, non-personal behavior as everything else. And pretty soon, if they didn't watch it, they would have established a whole new little cult. They would have established, they're operating outside the mainstream, let's say of Judaism at that time, or Christianity, whatever it was. They have established now an offshoot, a cult of Judaism or Christianity. The very act of trying to remember to do something to fight against this mechanical, non-personal flow will turn into what? A mechanical, non-personal habit. There you are. What do you want? It starts out sounding better, because most people accept the fact that if you tried to put a rock in your shoe, a little pebble, to remind yourself, I'm a sinner, I'm no good, I'm uncharitable, or, more positive view, to remember I am not fully conscious. And every time you walk, there it was. How long would it take? You must know. The best you could try, 2 days, 3 days, the third morning at best. By the third morning, you'd be used to it. You've got to. That's the way life is. When you start out doing it, and what appears to be at a non-physical level, it appears to be less likely to fall into such a trap. And it's not true. It is simply not true, and you prove it yourself. No matter what you try, you get used to it. What I have 7 minutes to do the full hour. Okay. I didn't use any terms. For those that you weren't around, I made up a few new terms that were still based on the same thing, because everybody that's ever done this has been talking about the same thing. Is you have first got to become aware of the fact that what you take to be you, which is simply this, which is simply what appears to be the flow of consciousness. And for the last few months, I've been dragging you from looking at traffic, then talking about it, trains, and one thing following another. And if you don't watch it, it's the way it seems. It seems like words are all associative, that thoughts are, that one thing brings up another. And you start, if you could notice it, that you're sitting there thinking that something I just said reminds you of something I said 2 years ago or something you heard another guy say, and you're still sitting here looking at me like you're listening. And then that triggers where you were. Wait, that was in Chicago that time. It went from Chicago to that bar where you were, and then went to O'Hare Field, and the plane was late, and you remember you run across this guy that told you that he used to live in Tibet. And it's all going like, but it's like almost one thing just dragging another, and that's not really a good idea. That's not really the best picture. I've tried to slow you, build you up, and I know I got vaguer in the last couple of weeks with all my little stories of a man did this, a man did that. But it is not linear. Consciousness gives it that effect for the same reason that the linearity, the history, the historical sequence of religions and apparently metaphysical work runs like that. It gives it a feeling of import. It gives it a feeling of significance that it does not deserve, that is simply not there. There is no linear, there is no sequential human consciousness. It's why in the midst of all my stories of trains and all that, you remember, I've never given up merry-go-rounds. But when you're conscious just at these flashes like that, one thing happens, and if you try to tell somebody right then, you realize all you're doing is thinking the same thing you were thinking. If it's the same fucking thing I've been reading your mind. I've got a machine that has been taking down what you think for the last 2 years. Of course, nobody's going to sit there and look at it, bore you to death. Which is no one always liked the idea that people fear that somebody reading their mind. God damn. If there's somebody could read human minds, you got nothing to fear from them. They're dumber than you are. I mean, if they went through the trouble to develop that talent and then tried to play like, I'm somebody, I can read your mind. Jesus, throw the man a quarter, tell him to get a job. It gives the appearance, when it's just flashing like this, if you tried to tell somebody, you're thinking the same thing over and over, they go, well, no. And you go, well, it just goes round and round. You've got a very limited sense of consciousness, and it's got nothing to do with you personally. And they go, no, you're wrong. Because, as a matter of fact, what I was just thinking about then, I was kind of daydreaming, and I was thinking about, let me guess, all the things that's happened to you. Yeah, the time I was in the airport in O'Hare, yeah, in Chicago, and I met this guy, yeah. But when it just flashes like this, you don't realize that you think the same things over and over and over, and it's got nothing to do with you personally, but it apparently, since you don't know anything consciously, you've got no knowledge, the only thing that consciousness does have to deal with in words is what has happened to you, and therefore you take it personally. Because all you normally think about is things that have happened to you or things you want to happen to you, which is just an extension of what's happened to you. And it seems to be, though, personal. And if you try to tell an ordinary person, if you said your thoughts, your daydream, just what goes through your mind is absolutely impersonal. And if they thought about it, they go, well, that's silly. They say, as a matter of fact, my daydreams, when I sit around and I'm just ruminating and musing, that's all I do is think about me. If you didn't think about yourself, you'd be crazy. What would you think about? I made up my own versions. There's some of you were around, remember, we're not about to get anywhere tonight with this. I'm just now where I was going. As always, you caught me. I'm right now, with 3 minutes left, where I meant to start out. Big deal. I played around with using specifics. I really laid on people. I'm telling you people a short history because everybody, all groups, all of this activity goes through such as that. I put restrictions. I didn't try. I absolutely put restrictions when I first started this on people of things I knew that would annoy them. For a long time, I said, if you're going to come here, you can't eat meat. And I never did tell them anything because nobody ever heard me talk about religion. It was obvious that it wasn't religion unless you were an idiot and trying to daydream it. And for a long time, I said nobody could drink, no drugs. But I picked, which does have some validity, of course, but I picked out things that in one sense had no validity, like you've got to stop all meat or don't come here. And people did it. And they forgot about it. They just quit eating meat. But I'd pick out other things. I'd make people show up at unruly times. I'd make us do all kinds of exercises. I'd make people for a while would get out and run before we'd have a meeting. I'd do all kinds of things, and I never explained it. I'm about to take an hour down to 2 minutes. Then I stopped all of it, for those of you who've been around for a while. And then I apparently have been staying here for a good number of years, and I just talk. And it just seems to go here and there and here and there and over here and it goes there. And sometimes I use terms for a while, and it sounds like maybe we're getting somewhere. And it's been years since I've said anything specific. Like, all right, by the way, don't eat meat. By the way, you should be trying to remember the word consciousness every time your neural system fires off in your brain, or every time you breathe. I haven't said anything like that in a long time. In fact, some of you have been out here so new, you've never heard me say anything that apparently said, well, here's something you should do. Why? That's what I was going to get to. Can you figure? If you figured I had something in mind, it doesn't mean that it worked. Well, trust me, it doesn't mean that everything that Buddha tried or anybody tried. There is no guarantee. But you understand, I started out doing it and saying, well, here's what you should do. And I thought, well, I got enough people that realize what it is to realize that you're not personally conscious. Or that what is now your sense of consciousness is not personal, and it's got nothing to do with you, and all you got to do is stop and look at it. Just remember to do it. And it just collapses. And there's no doubt about it after you do it enough times, and if you belong here. If you don't, I can't talk you into it or convince you, but you finally realize this is it. This is it. Here is the beginning of the path. Here's the beginning of where I want to go, wherever it is. Yes. Then it's almost as though I stopped it, of saying, all right, look at it directly. Because whatever it is will eventually become habit. And I say eventually, it can take just a matter of weeks or months. But it will become habit no matter what the hell it is. And you'll believe you're doing something when you're not. I then stopped apparently talking about anything directly. And it was like I turned the method in to absolutely no method whatsoever other than I describe life from how many different positions. I know at times you'll sit there and you think, wait a minute, you said that before. No, I know I get this close. But I have given all sorts of different versions of life, different descriptions. And I keep pointing out they're not criticisms, because if you take them as criticism, you go, oh, well, I understand that. I haven't said anything you can understand. Because if you could understand it, you would have seen it. And of course, some of you get to the point that you do see things yourself. You don't need me to feed you all this. But the point is, it's almost as though I'd lost or dropped any semblance of it being some actual mystical something, and it's like I became either some kind of entertainer, or I just got up here and just rambled. There was a method to the ramble. Again, I'm not saying it worked. I can't say that at all. I can't say that, well, it worked on some of you, but I can't say that it wasn't that I was now going to come up with I'm finally going to correct it and update all mystical systems. I'm going to straighten out Buddha and the rest of those fuckers. No, there's no straightening out to be done. It's just you do it at the time and the place. But it has reached the point that I've got to change, I know, but you had every opportunity to not have a system and to realize that all systems are simply a rock in your shoe anyway. Is to see that the whole thing is that no matter what you come up with will end up being gunfire in the night sky. But it can become one that you think, only me and a few other people see this particular one. And it makes me feel good to know that there is still some mystical gunfire going on over there. No, there's not. All you got to do is look at it. And that's when you know it's habit, is you don't like that. No, I can't let go of that. No, it's still going on. That's like losing your faith. You shouldn't have any faith. Faith's got nothing to do with it. It's like losing my hope. No. Faith and hope and all that is common consciousness. Because when you look up and you start taking that personally, you don't need faith. You don't need hope. I mean, it's just irrelevant. You don't need anything. You especially don't need talk. So I'll stop. You people out there in other cities and here, I don't know. I was literally, I spent the last 3 minutes where I was going to start. But those of you that heard something. Those of you who didn't. And those of you that had to go to the bathroom early, I trust you didn't piss blood. I don't know what you people know, but in the other cities, besides them having this on television in those cities, but these groups have been around from, California, where they're in New York places. They get together and like show them 3 a night. Get that. They sit there. I think they do take a pee break or a water break between tapes, but they get together and sit there. I kind of like the idea of that. In a way, I don't. That how could they sit there all this length of time, and I hadn't heard explosions, not of the earthquake, not of the physical riot in Los Angeles. How could they sit there watching them 3 hours at a time?